Hi, and welcome to Inspiring Honesty. I'm your host, Greg Brahe, and I'm an atheist. Today I'll be joined again by my fantastic co-host, Bob Greaves. And without further ado, Bob, how are you doing today?
Well, I'm doing pretty good. I've been actually, to be honest with you, a little bit frazzled because my wife and I have been working on some sewing, and I'm the sewer, but I'm not an expert seamstress, and so trying to pants for her without destroying them, and so we got one pair done, and figured out how we're gonna have to do the rest because there wasn't enough left to do a proper hem. But anyhow, so I'm like, oh, it's good to have to come up here now and do the show because I'm a little bit done with the sewing.
Well, that is actually a fantastic segue into the subject I wanted to talk about today. Anybody who follows me on Facebook has seen my page, Inspiring Doubt, will have seen that the subject I wanted to talk about is homosexuality today, but specifically gender identities to go along with that. And, on that note, you realize that sewing, that's a woman's job, right?
I guess my wife and I have never really worried too much about gender roles that much. I'm the cook in the house. I don't think we've ever really worried about whether or not the things that we do or don't do are gender oriented. There are ways in which we are very traditional and ways in which we're very counter traditional, and we just never chose anything for any reason. We just be ourselves.
Well, as long as you understand that you're going to burn in hell for that.
That's fine.
Entirely okay with me. I absolutely agree. I work outside of the home when I get the opportunity to, as a contractor, as a tutor, and in a few other capacities. But for the most part, I'm a stay-at-home dad, and that is it's caused, oddly enough, some discomfort in family members to even talk about. They talk about me as or my position to say, well, he's between jobs, or he's right now he's at home with Casey. But all I can think is, would anybody make that kind of hesitation if it was my wife? That if I was out being the breadwinner and she was staying home with our son?
There's all sorts of people do all sorts of things, some for good reasons, some for bad reasons, and these are choices people make, and some of them are just none of our business,
Well, mine are all for the wrong reasons, of course. I just hate working. So I chose to stay at home and watch a 2-year-old. And then I realized that working is far easier.
Yeah. I think we both like what we do. Lisa is a fantastic nanny. She really is. She's when she tells me stories about the things she's doing with the kids, I feel like, my, these kids are so fortunate to have her as a nanny. She's awesome. And I don't tell her that enough.
There is some serious talent that comes behind nannying and taking care of children. That I think I'm a decent dad, but I am nothing compared to grandma when it comes to dealing with even my son. That woman has a gift. It's incredible.
I think that dealing with your own children is not as easy as dealing with somebody else's many times, because we have such a dog in the fight that I think it clouds our thinking. I think it's good for us to have to, from time to time, deal with other children. It gives us perspective and helps us to be more mindful of the way we treat our own children. And I'm in a second marriage, and being a dad in my second marriage is very different from the dad that I was in the first marriage. I'm very disappointed with the way that my immaturity expressed itself in my first marriage as a dad. I don't think that I ever had any deliberate immaturity, but I was a very fundamentalist at the time, which made me quite strict, and I think that it was all with what I thought were good intentions, but when I look back at some of it, I feel like it was just not good. Yeah,
I think that deliberate immaturity is a bit of an oxymoron. I'm not sure anybody makes that choice.
Right? Yeah. Although some people don't care about growing up, and some people are just too troubled that even in their attempt to be their best, they have no idea how much they're just doing the wrong thing.
Oh man, if that applies to anything in life, it applies to everything. Uh, even the best of intentions, right? And actually, the idea of choice segues quite well into the thing that inspired me to talk about homosexuality this week was. Did you hear about the Mormon Church?
I did, yes.
This is groundbreaking stuff here. And viewers, please pay attention. The Mormon Church is now more forward thinking than most of the fundamentalist United States, or the fundamentalist crowd in the United States. They have admitted that homosexuality is not a choice. And that doesn't seem like that much. They still condemn homosexual behavior. They think that gay marriage should be outlawed, but they have recognized the fact that gender or sexual orientation is not something that you choose. And I don't know how long it took them to come to this conclusion, or what kind of processes they had to go through. But for
Well, they don't
me
have a
to
good
make that
history with
realization,
homosexuality. They really don't. Um,
no,
at least in my opinion. So I think this is a step in the right direction. I think they need to take it a lot farther, but it is definitely a step in the right direction. I mean, when you think back about it, it wasn't that long ago, even the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual considered homosexuality to be a mental illness. And of course,
that's
that's
very
no
true.
longer the case with the DSM. But so, this is progress. It's movement in the correct direction.
Well,
I,
I honestly think that it's astounding to me. It's dumbfounding that it took this long to come to. And I'm not talking about homosexuality overall, and to be accepting of it. And accepting is a term that I want to promote, by the way, that I cannot handle the term tolerance, because who wants to be tolerated? I mean, there's the Museum of Tolerance when you go to, I believe it's in LA, where my wife went to that. And I mean, tolerance is a big buzzword that is used. They teach about it in schools. They promote tolerance, and tolerance just means stop being hateful and mean. It doesn't mean be loving and be accepting and be kind. So I don't. I just I don't see where that can come from. But how difficult did does it have to be to look at your own sexual orientation? I am happily married to a woman, and I have been dating her for now as of Monday, I believe. I'm terrible with what days, but it was the 4th, Tuesday. As of
Careful.
Tuesday, I know the date. It's just my days of the week as they relate to the date. Um, it, as of Tuesday, we have been dating for 11 years, since our junior year of high school. So we are true high
Cool.
school sweethearts.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Awesome.
thank you.
Yeah.
It's been quite the journey, been fantastic, and I love every moment of it. But that's I guess not really the point I was getting at. Is that I I don't remember sitting, before we started dating, and I had one girlfriend before my wife. She has never dated anybody but me, so she doesn't know what she's missing. But I, I don't remember sitting around and contemplating with myself, looking at I don't know, we'll say GQ, and looking at Maxim magazine and going, which one do I find more sexually attractive? I just, that was never a decision I had to make. It's a natural occurrence. I find women attractive, and I can't imagine anybody going the other direction and saying, well, I find women attractive, but I'm going to date and fall in love with men.
No. Yeah. Yeah. It is absurd the degree to which it is sometimes perceived as a choice. Now, I think that there comes a time, though, once you admit that it's a choice, and I've seen some try to deal with it well. Now you've got to come to the terms that there can be something that, although it's not a choice, it is still wrong. I mean, to be honest with you, I've heard it saying, like, well, I get angry and I want to hit somebody, and but I still have to, control my behavior. I really don't see that as the same thing for many, many reasons. But I think that, like I said, it's a step in the right direction. But there comes a point where you have to begin to ask the question, how is it even possible that there could be something that has absolutely no more moral quality to it in terms of its choice, and yet we're going to say that it's sinful? I just, to me, I don't even understand the concept of sin as it might apply to something like that from a philosophical standpoint in a way that is in any manner appropriate, fair, or even credible, personally. But
Well, and that whole concept of sin, it applies on multiple levels. When you look at the idea of sin as displeasing to God, that means anything can be a sin. If we can arbitrarily find a manuscript that says that cutting your fingernails is displeasing to God, then
he's got a
nearly
problem,
everyone of us is
I mean,
sinning. There's
that's just not my problem,
right.
And I feel badly for God that he's got all these hangups, but sorry, I just don't get it,
I've run into a few people in the past that have said something along the lines of, well, it really bothers me the way that your Wisconsin accent, for example, was one that just people from it was my cousin actually from the South who's like, I can't handle your Wisconsin accent, and I was like, well, then you're not going to enjoy time around me. There's
Well, tell him
I
to
don't know what I
watch
can
Fargo
say.
like 5 times in a row. He'll love your accent. Yeah?
Yeah, yeah. Uh, I did not recognize just how much of an accent that I truly do have from around here until I spent some time away and came back and went, wow, all right, we really do talk different. I watch the news and I see the standard American English when they speak with the intonation that you would expect to see on nightly news, and that's how I feel like I talk, but
Mhm.
apparently I don't. I just don't notice.
That's true of most people in the United States. It is such it is such an accent we have grown accustomed to hearing that we fail to hear the difference. And most people feel like they talk like the people on the nightly news. Well, many are, some are really well aware of it, but it's a common experience no matter what sector of the country they come from. I have no idea what my accent is. I grew up in New York. And I know when I went to college in South Carolina, my mom was very concerned that I would pick it up. And of course, I had to call her like after I'd been there a week and hi, Ma, how y'all doing? And she was, ah! But
My sister-in-law just visited. She has lived in the UK for, was it 3 or 4 years now? I think it's 3 years, but well, maybe it's four. Either way, she has lived there long enough now that when she came back, she didn't sound American.
uh-huh.
Her accent. I mean, she uses entirely different words. You can almost hear her spell the word color differently when she says it. It's
Mm.
incredible. But I don't know. That's when I look at going back to the subject of gender identities and of sexual orientations. Admittedly, your accents or dialects are going to be entirely a product of your culture and your environment. But I look at it much the same way: is that's just what is normal to you. You don't choose it. You may intentionally choose to change it to deny your past or your natural inclination. I mean, there's people who do practice standard American English or other accents to intentionally lose their natural inclination.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with the first one or that
Yeah.
it's just mind-boggling to me. And I wanted to see if there's any of our viewers that hold a different opinion on homosexuality. I like to think that the New Covenant group is inclusive enough that we do have viewers that have a broad variety of viewpoints. But the other thing that I like to think is that those who might hold differing viewpoints would be willing to give a justification for them and to where they're coming from. So I'd love to hear.
Most of the
That.
arguments that I hear that condemn homosexuality strike me as although they try to bring them from a wide variety of axes and angles, they all strike me as a way of trying to come up with a way of a multifaceted spin to justify what they believe to be uh, the teaching of the New Testament and the Old Testament. And if it weren't for the Bible as they understand it, I don't know that anybody in our culture would ever have any reason for giving it two thoughts. I can't, although people say, well, it isn't natural, depending on how you define natural and how you twist that into your argument. If it weren't for the way the Bible is translated and understood, I don't see how this could even exist in our culture at all on any level.
Well, I would actually disagree with you on that one. I think that the Bible has been a major culprit, but if you look across the board, I was doing some research before the show, and of course the other Abrahamic religions do have the similar opinions coming from of course, the Old Testament, but Islam sees same-sex desires as natural temptations that are still negative and to be avoided and sinful, but they take the same position the Mormon Church now takes, that that's not something that can be avoided to have these temptations or these attractions, but the behavior should be avoided. And that's very different from what much of the fundamentalist Christians believe, that it is truly a choice that people walk into. But even outside of the Abrahamic religions, Buddhism, Jainism, Hindu, there's a massive variety of acceptance or persecution of homosexuality through these different religions that are extant today, let alone the ones that have existed in the past. I understand that the ancient Greeks practiced it on a regular basis, and it was almost expected as a society. And
I think that Greek history has a real roller coaster. There's times when it was considered, a sign of genius, and times when it was considered horrible. So but it's certainly been through a variety of phases. Yeah.
What this leads me to believe, and I look at this on an anthropological scale, is that homosexuality or other than heterosexuality, be it bisexuality, asexuality, anything that is different from the average. And I should really take a moment as well to discuss the perceptions on numbers. Even when I posted the comment on, or the post about what we were going to be talking about, I got a comment on it. I'm looking for it here real quick just to see if I can read that off. It came from the friend of the show, Nick Albertini, who said, and I like the way this is worded. I talked about the Mormon Church changing its position, and he said, they have so many kids. You'd think they'd notice that 11% of them just happen to be homosexual, regardless of how they're raised. Duh.
Well, they have, and this is why one of the reasons I said that the Mormon Church has a history with dealing with. Back in the 50s, they even provided electroshock therapy to help treat them. There was a variety of other things. There have been a few ministries that have attempted to reach out to them to help them reorient. So they have noticed. But something that they don't seem to notice is that, of course, it is no longer legal or even proper church doctrine, I guess, in the Mormon Church for men to have multiple wives, as it used to be. But I'll tell you something: lesbianism found an easy home in that kind of Mormon culture.
That's an interesting thought. I hadn't really considered that, but wow. Floored me with that one there, Bob.
Yeah, it was kind of the original American version of Menage a Trois, I guess. But it just I find that in some ways it may be my own bias or my own temperament. I find that I am myself. Talk about tolerance versus acceptance. I find myself quite I don't know if intolerant is the word, but I find myself very engaged in opposing the anti-homosexuality attitudes. I do, very, very strong on that.
Well, I did want to talk more about tolerance in that respect as well, as I've been accused of being intolerant myself on many occasions. And I don't like the term tolerance, but I feel that it more than applies in most of the situations I look at. I try to be as accepting of variation as possible. However, the reason that the reason that I initially got associated with Dr. Jones was because of this very subject. I had been part of a Unitarian Universalist discussion group where people were talking about turning the group private or closing the group so that their fellow church members couldn't see their ideas, and it would be the discussions that we were having would be hidden because they feared repercussions. I
And there are
said, well,
repercussions in the hell-bleeding crowd, yeah. But yeah,
and my response to that is, well, you shouldn't be a part of that church then. You should be standing up to this and facing this intolerance wherever you see it, because as long as we tolerate intolerance, we're not helping in any way. There comes a point where you need to
right.
recognize that intolerance is bad.
Yeah.
And when you stand by and allow bad things to happen, you are complicit.
Yeah,
And that's all there is to it.
I think that though the word intolerant and the word tolerant are loaded terms, because the difference between unacceptable and intolerant is sometimes one of mood. And I do think it's appropriate. I mean, we should find, child abuse unacceptable. We should not tolerate it. But then again, the style with which we deal with it, this doesn't mean we string pedophiles up by their gonads and there's a way of dealing with it. And so I think that what we do is we tend to charge these words with certain styles and attitudes, and then when we do that, we then try to take anybody who really does have a line they need to draw. And it confuses it, because I do think that it is appropriate to draw lines. Sometimes I think it's appropriate to draw lines that I personally might draw, but then again, that's a personal line, and it only applies to things that are under my responsibility and control. So so I think it does make it difficult. I mean, we end up becoming people who are trying to be politically correct, and I don't think that's a good idea either. But yeah, I hear what you're saying, though, that we in part of that social game that we play with the words intolerant and tolerance and all that, I think that sometimes we're not paying attention to what we actually imply.
Well, and this is why my discussion when our very first guest, Alan Darley, I feel that the conversation that we had is one that can never end. That we really need to carry on the question of morality and where can morality be found? Because frankly, if Alan's argument that morality originally comes from God is to be accepted, then anything that God decrees as bad is bad. It's tautological. If God defines morality and God defines something as immoral, it is immoral.
Now, as a theist, I would totally disagree with Alan on that point. And as a theist, I disagree with it. That morality has to be based, in my opinion, on the nature and the conditions and the impact of the people who are required to be moral. And the people impacted by their actions, and that it has to do with the nature of the outcomes as they affect the people making the choices and the people affected by it. And if it's not found there, it has no basis or authority, in my opinion.
I absolutely concur on that one, and I think that that's an important point that I need to continue driving, is that that if morality comes from God, then the people who frankly, I mean, and I'm not going to get into whether or not the translations are accurate, because I think that you and Dr. Jones have pretty well established that that's not the case. But if we, as the common Christian in America does, accept a current extant translation of the Bible to be accurate, and we fully accept that morality is defined by God, then not only should we be not tolerating homosexual behavior, we should be
Stoning
murdering
them.
homosexuals. I mean, and
Yeah.
that would be not only moral but righteous. It would be a
Yeah.
good thing.
But when you make morality something external to your own process, you abdicate your responsibility. You define a sense of rightness that in some ways is completely irrelevant to yourself. And to me, that in and of itself strikes me as being borderline immoral.
Something occurred to me the other day. It was, again, my anniversary with my wife, for dating, not our wedding anniversary, which is June 30th. And don't worry, I remember that too. But
Good.
um, it we when we were in high school, the movie Moulin Rouge came out, and it's kind of our movie. We watched it on one of our first dates, and the music from that has been significant to us. We danced to the version of the song "Your Song" by Elton John that
Hmm.
was in that film. And that, ironically, I found out after that, we danced to that as our first dance to our wedding. But I found out after that is also the song for, I believe it's my dad and my stepmom, that is their song, but the Elton John version. And boggles my mind is that song was written by a homosexual man, and the only interpretation I can come up with is that it was written to a man. That is one of the, in my opinion, greatest love songs of our time.
Yeah.
It speaks volumes to me in the emotions and the passion felt in this moment. So for me to consider that as some sort of debauched choice,
Yeah.
and
Well, of
not
course, at the time
or a
that Elton John
perversion.
wrote that, of course, Bernie Taupin was his songwriting partner, and I don't think he's gay. But at that time, Elton John identified himself as bisexual, and he actually got married, I think. I think he
Oh,
did.
well, I may have
But
been mistaken on that one then, but
yeah, but I think that also, though, that I think he deliberately wrote songs in a way where they would be uh, sometimes ambiguous, but then sometimes, typical pop. Terrific songwriter, by the way. I'm just impressed with Elton John as a talent. He's just incredible. And for the longest time, a lot of people who loved Elton John had no idea that his sexual orientation was other than what his flamboyancy might suggest. But
well, the indicator that I
yeah,
was taking from that song, and but
yeah,
it's a touch before my time when that was written, is that my gift is my song, boy, and this one's for you. It could be the linguistic use of boy as in
could
oh
be,
boy,
yeah,
or it could very literally mean it's being written to a boy. And yeah, either
yeah,
one, it doesn't matter to me. That's what I'm getting at here, is that
yeah.
the love expressed in that song,
Is
it's
wonderful,
true
wonderful.
and
Yeah,
it's real
yeah,
regardless of what the target is, and or the object. But and for somebody to think different to that is mind-boggling to me. That if they were to find out, and I'm not saying this is necessarily the case, but if it is true that that was written by a man to a man, and for somebody to find that out and think that somehow took away from the song, or the emotions were contrived or less real, it's
yeah.
it's horrifying to me that is such a.
Some people have suggested that when John Lennon wrote "You've Got to Hide Your Love Away," um, that he wasn't necessarily trying to make it entirely gay, but that he may have had even Brian Epstein in mind that when he wrote it, and
Hmm.
that this guy's got a. But can you imagine what it would be like if you and I lived in a world where it was maybe okay that we love boobs, but we just can't act on it, and you can't get married, you can't. It's just a bias in a direction you're just going to have to live with and never act on. I think men, even more so than women, are oftentimes people who would feel like, oh, well, I don't know what I'd do if I weren't married. I couldn't cope with life or something. I, but think about it. Can you imagine? That's basically what you're telling a gay person when you say, "But you can't act on this," otherwise that's sin. Um, you're basically saying the exact same thing, that as what it would be for us to decide that, okay, I can experience life as a heterosexual, I just can't do anything about it.
Well, how cruel is that position? Anybody who has ever longed for somebody, has had unrequited love, can fully recognize the pain that can cause. That when you love somebody, but you know that for one reason or another you can't act on it. Look at Romeo and Juliet. It's the quintessential love story that so many others are based on, and it's all about that. It's a forbidden love, and in that particular story, it's young people who end up literally throwing their lives away for it, because it's that strong of an emotion. So for us to tell somebody, no, you can't act on it, it has to be one of the cruelest positions you can take.
It's like, I like chocolate ice cream, but at my age and in my condition, I really have to be careful with the ice cream. But I don't have an ice cream drive, contrary to the way it may seem. But
I don't know about you, but I certainly do. Yeah.
When you stop to think about it, though, our sexuality and that drive, particularly for the male, because even for the female, testosterone is a key ingredient in their own libido and sex drive. That this is you're actually taking something that is not only a natural inclination, and you're taking something for which there's a biological drive and saying no. And of course, I think that it should be a very clear lesson to Christians who have learned the grace versus law, that when Paul starts talking about, that saying thou shalt not covet created in me every kind of coveting. Well, just what sort of emotions, feelings, attitudes, and behavior do you think you're going to provoke by telling somebody you cannot pursue this direction that they're driven toward? I think you're
right. Don't think about an elephant right now, Bob.
Pardon me?
I said, don't think about an elephant right now. It's.
You make me think about Tim Conway.
Right. I have to say that in my research in the last day or so, looking at the positions that different faiths take, I have been impressed, and I've been impressed more and more and more with the Dalai Lama, and I need to do some more research into this guy. And I understand that nobody's perfect, and that there have been bad decisions made in the past, but this guy, he said that if Buddhism and if science are to come to a point where they conflict, well, Buddhism will have to give way to science.
Right.
That I respect a lot. He says, or he supports human rights fully, regardless of sexual orientation. And that I think is the key there, is that it boils down to human rights. These are humans, and it doesn't matter what kind of humans they are. They have the right to love and to be with the people that they want to be with. I don't know. I'm passionate about this. I attended my first gay wedding this year. It was about 2 months ago, and it was a very close friend of mine from high school who I actually almost sort of dated for a bit, and she did date my best friend for some time, and she fell in love with a woman, and she does not identify herself as a lesbian. She identifies as bisexual. She says to her, she doesn't fall in love with the gender. She falls in love with the person. And I've seen the two of them together. I know her wife, and they're as in love as any other couple I've ever seen. It's just, for me to try to take away from that, for anybody to try to take away from that, it's more than just me saying it would be wrong, it would be disingenuous, it wouldn't feel right for me to try to take away from that. But it is wrong for somebody else to try to take away from that. It angers me. It upsets me when I see other people speaking against these things. And
It's none of their business. If you believe that gay sex is wrong, then don't engage in it. That may be a personal decision you get to make, but it's a bit outside of your own boundaries, and it's inappropriate for you to feel that somehow, without some better justification to try to forbid other people to behave in a manner contrary to the way you personally believe. It would be almost like trying to make being a Democrat or being a Republican illegal because I'm in the other party. That's stupid.
I think that the world might be a better place if we made both illegal. Just said, hey, no more, pick something else.
You might be right there.
And that's a fantastic point. And a question that really should be addressed is that homosexuality and bisexuality, heterosexuality are not necessarily the only sexual orientations possible. I have seen very compelling arguments that pedophilia and hebephilia are real sexual orientations and not perversions in the way that people would think, or fetishes, but people who honestly find prepubescent children to be sexually attractive or appealing for one reason or another. And I can't, I don't know how to say that if we're saying that tolerance is,
I think that there would be several differences. However, I would personally find it. First of all, I think that in many ways we don't understand human sexuality. I do think that whatever orientation we will have is something that becomes formed prior to puberty. Puberty becomes the age at which we discover it. It is not the age at which we choose it. And I think that when it comes to pedophilia or even necrophilia, or some of these other what we might still consider aberrations, that there is usually a history in the life of the person that we can identify that in many ways may have affected them and may have thereby altered what would have been normal development. We don't have the ability to identify this when it comes to being gay, sexual, or homosexual, bisexual. But, I used to work with some people who struggle with certain, sexual obsessions. And an example, a very, very common type example, working with one woman who was a cutter and trying to overcome this need to cut herself as part of her sexuality. And the thing was that she, as a prepubescent child, had been exposed to pornography where women were being tortured. And she was seeing men in some sort of, turgid state, and as a result of this kind of pornography. And this had a huge impact on her when she finally reached puberty, and she really did struggle with it. In the self-mutilation that could, and in dealing with other people, I can see this in their past. I have never spoken to a pedophile who had not been abused as a child.
Well, and there should be a significant distinction made between pedophile and child molester as well. That there are plenty of child molesters who do it for a variety of reasons and not necessarily sexual attraction to children.
Perhaps,
but within the group that is child molesters, some of them are truly and for one reason or another attracted to children. And we have a viewer comment here that is fantastic. The reason I wanted to bring this one up today, it was specifically on my agenda, and I wanted to bring it up without offering an opinion, was to see what viewer comment it's going to generate. And this is fantastic. It says, if pedophilia is not a choice, then it is definitely a sickness, and pedophiles should be kept from children. Whether it's a choice or not, it harms children, and there's nothing about it that needs to be tolerated, except to get the person with the problem some serious help. And that is the key. When we talk about how can we make a judgment on homosexuality and say I argue that we need to be more than tolerant, we need to be accepting.
Mm.
I can make exactly the opposite argument when it comes to pedophilia. I certainly say that we need to be understanding that there are people that this is a, a compulsion, that it's not something that they can control or choose to be sexually attracted in these ways. But it comes down to this: whether or not, and I quote again here, or whether it's a choice or not, it harms children.
It
Harm.
does, yeah. Yes.
That's the key.
And by the way, getting back to your the statement that they are sincerely attracted to children. Yes, they are. I think that they are attracted in a manner that is, indistinguishable in the ways that other people would be oriented. But I would also, say that, if a person at a particular point in their development suffers a particular trauma, this trauma can thereafter alter their natural development in various ways. No matter what that trauma is, some people have a very traumatic experience with authority when, before they reach puberty. And this can have a traumatic effect on the way they naturally relate to authority thereafter. And this is unfortunate, but I think we can attribute it to the impact of a damage done to them. And so, although I don't want to act as if pedophiles don't experience this genuine sense of attraction, and in fact, many times I remember one time I had a discussion with one particular pedophile where he was getting ready to go to trial, and he was aware of the fact that what he'd done was illegal. He was aware of the fact that people were really upset about it. He was even aware of the fact that in our culture we don't accept this. But the one thing that he had to tell me, and he said it so sincerely, he said, "You don't realize, though, that this little girl, she was being seductive. She wanted me." And I don't think he really believed that she was sending sexual signals. He really believed that she was somehow a participant in this. And that was how he saw it. To me, this indicates that his perspective, though very real as his perspective, was a distortion. And I don't think we can make that same kind of argument when it comes to, the homosexual, gay, lesbian, bisexual issue. I don't think we can make it there. And since we can attribute it to child abuse and an experience as a child, I think that puts it more in the direction of a damaged and bent twig, in a sense.
Well, the question that I guess. Yeah. The angle that I take on this is we have a viewer comment. I don't know if it's the same viewer or not, but they said homosexuality, on the other hand, is not a sickness. My opinion, no. or at least my opinion, they are not harming anyone, and many homosexuals have genuine love and sense of protection, support, and natural connection with their partner, which is both good and right.
Respect the boundaries and everything. Sure, yeah.
Regardless of the origin of these sexual attractions that pedophiles have towards children. Even if they were born that way and it's entirely unavoidable, there was no way that we could trace that back to any sort of trauma in their childhood, that still doesn't matter. It's not something that needs to be tolerated or accepted, and it's something that should be controlled and stopped and fought against for the simple fact that what they do harms children. And it harms
sociopaths people. Are definitely, honestly sociopathic.
The perfect example. Sociopaths are sociopathic, and there's nothing they can do about that. That doesn't mean that we need to be okay with it, because what they do harms. And if we look at things as right or wrong based on, well, did this come from a dictum in a book, or is this what would make my God happy? How can we make any sort of value judgment based on consequences, on harm?
I think it makes us unempathetic. The more we accept a morality as dictated by God, we cannot accept a morality that is based on a genuine empathy and awareness of the impact our action has on others. Yeah.
So, viewer, thank you for your comments today. You have really you've helped illustrate the point so beautifully that you're absolutely right. There is no conceivable way for me to see homosexuality as a harmful or in any way negative orientation. And that's I lost track of my thought because we got another viewer comment in the middle of that thought that I wanted to address directly. It says, though I appreciate your courage in talking about the subject of pedophilia, I regret that it was placed in comparison with homosexuality on your first discussion about the topic. Seems like it would have been better in a separate topic. My opinion, love you both. Or love to you both, sorry. That I agree that the two seem, by bringing them up together, it seems to be comparing them as if they are related. But I hope that it's coming across. My goal with bringing it up is
all sexuality is related in some way or another. But I do think it would. I would make we hopefully we have made a strong distinction between the two. There's so many axes involved here that it's
and part of the reason that
many
I brought
times
it
people
up,
bring those up.
I wanted to make the illustration or the comparison as to how we can say that something is wrong and how we can say that something is entirely normal and harmless and should be accepted as natural and as a part of life. So I did so in a way to say that, yes, there may indeed be multiple sexual orientations. Heterosexuality, homosexuality, asexuality. There's so many different ways that people can identify themselves sexually. But the only thing that we ever have the right to judge people on in those situations is if their actions are causing harm. And if you cannot come up with a way to show me or to show the world the harm being caused by somebody's sexual orientation, you have absolutely no right to condemn them. And I know that the juxtaposition may not have been the most appropriate in some people's eyes, but I brought it up specifically to illustrate how the two are associated in a way that
since we've done that, though, Greg, since we have done that, maybe it would be appropriate to bring up another thing to compare with homosexuality, another really bad and aberrant behavior, heterosexuality. When we look at the way, when you look at rape, when you look at the way women and children have been treated like chattel, heterosexuality has no right to be standing on some sort of moral throne and condemning everyone else for the basic anthropological problem of not like me-ism. That, as far as I'm concerned.
You make a fantastic point, and this is another thing that that really should be addressed, is that pedophilia, as much as it is frequently a male perpetrator and a male victim, more often than not, or not pedophilia, I'm sorry, child molestation, more often than not, it is not performed by homosexual men. The perpetrators are in heterosexual relationships. They are, or in some cases, not in relationships or allowed to be in relationships due to their vocation. But that is a minority group that does get a bad rap because of its position. But regardless, I want to avoid this subject of priests at the moment. But I think that it needs to be addressed. The two need to be addressed in juxtaposition to, and all of them, you're right, heterosexuality should be included in this as well, to illustrate the fact that there is a huge and significant difference in the two. And anybody who would couch them together in a way as if they're comparable really is not making any sort of justified comparison in any way. And that we need to, as rational adults, consider these situations and say, what harm is it causing if my neighbor Steve falls in love with his buddy Jake? I'm sorry, I cannot fathom a world in which that will cause any sort of negative effects for me.
It doesn't have any. It's none of my business. Yeah.
So with that, this has been Inspiring Honesty. It's our first foray into a rather controversial subject, and I apologize to have made it more controversial if it came off in a way that I didn't intend it to. But regardless, thank you for joining us. Thank you, Bob, as well, for joining me. And tune in again next week at 6 p.m. I will have a guest on, or we will have a guest on, whose name is Molly Walk. She is a fellow biologist who went to college with my wife at St. Norbert College here in Wisconsin, and just recently got her master's degree, with her thesis being teaching evolution to creationists. So this, I could not pass up the opportunity to let her come on the show and to talk about what she just spent years of her life researching. So I'm really excited for next week's show. It's completely unrelated to this week's show in subject matter, but regardless, thank you for joining us, and tune in again next week for Inspiring Honesty.